Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the little delay. We're going to get going in about a minute or so. So as everybody is streaming into the webinar room, get comfortable and get settled and get ready for a great presentation from our friends at Fujitsu. Okay, as people are streaming in, I want to say hello and happy new year to everybody. I'm Liz Mancini. I'm the Senior Manager of Member Services for AAPA, and I welcome you all to today's webinar, From Dock to Dock, Future-Proof Your Operations with Fujitsu. Today, we're going to delve into Fujitsu's latest digital solutions tailored for seaports, and we're going to explore their practical use cases, demonstrating how these innovations can help you optimize operations, manage critical assets, achieve sustainability targets, and revolutionize the supply chain experience. We're excited to hear what our experts Jim, George, Mark, and Shan have to share with us today. We'll be happy to take your questions during the presentation, so feel free to post any questions you have in the chat or questions area as you think of them. So let's get started. And I'd like to introduce you to our presenters, Jim Prevel, George Gakuru, Mark Condon, and Shan Chidambaram. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers. And gentlemen, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm George Gakuru. I'm very, very excited to speak to you guys early in the year, share with you what Fujitsu is doing in the port space. I head up technology growth programs within Fujitsu, and in this particular role, the mandate is for us to get into the port space and share what we've done around the world in the port space. And I have a team here that's going to really delve into our different experiences within the port space and share with you our Fujitsu story. I'll hand it over initially to Mark Condon to give a brief introduction before we dive into the rest of the webinar. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, George. Well, it's great to be here, and it's really we're really happy to be with the AAPA. They've been super helpful with our market awareness and growth. So thank you, Liz. My background personally is I've been in global trade for about 25 years, with 10 years of that as director of the South Carolina World Trade Center. In that, I was promoting the South Carolina ports. From there, I went to work with CBP, U.S. Customs data, the bills of ladings at Piers, Descartes Data Mine, and Import Genius. And we were, in my background, we were mainly on the bills, working with NVOCCs, BCOs, and then, working with quite a few ports. And we were helping on market share, business intel, and then figure out how to grow their port business. And so I've got kind of a wide background, and it's been really great being part of the Fujitsu team. And I want to hand it over, I guess, to Shan for an intro.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a great start to 2024. Pleasure to be all here this morning talking to you all. Thanks in advance for your time. My name is Shan Chidambaram. I'm the head of AI at Fujitsu. My background over the last 25 years, I'm a data analytics technologist and a management consultant. Prior to joining Fujitsu 8 years ago, I used to be, working with leading management consulting firm. Again, with regard to this particular topic, in terms of maritime and how the global supply chain is dependent on it, I would say just a few years ago, I was learning from the fire hose when COVID pandemic struck. I was blessed with an opportunity to help, alleviate some of these challenges. I'll talk about those experiences as we go along. Again, very pleased to talk to you all. Again, handing it over to Jim for introduction.
Thanks, Jan. I'll just echo my colleagues. It's great to be here with AAPA. They have been very helpful, and Liz has as well. I'm a senior director in management consulting and solutions with Fujitsu. As you can tell from my gray hair, I've got a lot of life experience one way or another. I have a background in both management and technology consulting. I've had several CIO experiences, both with early stage companies and with more mature global companies. And I've had an opportunity over the last 10, 11 years with Fujitsu to consult in a number of different industries, including ports and some adjacent industries to the ports environment. And with that, I'll kick it back to our moderator, George Gukuru.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So let's maybe get a perspective from you, Mark, on what the state of the market is within the ports industry. If you could give us a view on where the ports are now in the Americas.
Well, as we all know, it's great to be in the AAPA with, folks in the trenches every day with so many of the ports being so active. The ports industry really has tremendous competitive pressures, everybody knows, but the odd and unique thing about the ports is so many stakeholders, from the shippers, carriers, labor, forwarders, truckers, keeping them happy, and then keeping your city, state, and federal partners also happy at the same time, under these tremendous pressures. And just in meetings this morning on the challenges with the Suez and rates changing and so forth, it really is a dynamic and really challenging area. And so, with that perspective, our team, we really understand change is tough. I mean, this is it's a lot of different, competing issues to grow and change and evolve. But we're here to do that. And the reason my coming from the outside is really interesting, because when I look at, Fujitsu, Fujitsu is uniquely qualified, for what we're talking about today, because realize that Fujitsu is actually a manufacturer of, we're a BCO ourselves, and we're a shipper, and we understand the needs of it. And then what Jim was mentioning and Chan were talking about, that we're working with lots of other large shippers on their supply chains and within consulting, all kinds of different ways. And the scope of Fujitsu is tremendous, with 120,000 plus employees, over 30 billion in revenue. But what I didn't realize is that Fujitsu is a leader in high-speed computing, and that really sets us apart in that we understand so many aspects of change within the ports, and we understand the problems from the shipper side ourselves. So it's really we think and we know we're uniquely qualified to be a partner to folks within the industry for change. And realize that for 30 years, Fujitsu's had a headquarters in Texas, and then we have a research center in California. So we're not new to the U.S. It's just that we're relatively new to the seaports. So and we really have strong capabilities in Canada and so forth. So we're really strong in North America. So we're really thrilled for what the AAPA has done for us for awareness, and realize that we're a great partner going forward. And with that, I just want to make sure you realize we'll be at Powers with colleagues down there with AAPA, and we'll also be at the events in Seattle, and obviously the fall event. I think it's in Boston, but we look forward to seeing you at the AAPA events, and then also we'll be at your port, whenever need be. We'll see you in person. But with that, I want to turn it back to George, our moderator, and then we'll continue into our team.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that. And maybe Shannon, Jim, if you guys would like to add beyond the experiences we have directly with ports in the Americas, any adjacencies in terms of work we've done in ports, whether globally or in other industries that are adjacent to the port. If you guys want to maybe double click on that a little bit. Sure.
Jen, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sure, I can start. As I mentioned in my introduction, I would rather look at like the overall global supply chain, which is the backbone of which maritime industry is kind of the backbone. So during one of the examples that I would talk about, which vividly is in my memory yet, is when COVID pandemic broke. We all kind of were scrambling for the most valuable personal protective equipments. There was like so much fluidity and tension in the air. So one of the things that Fujitsu was doing as a societal project, and I was blessed to lead that, working with the US government, was to understand kind of how COVID is spreading, of course, using AI as a technology, doing some predictions in terms of understanding the various variables, which I can kind of closely relate to what maritime industry is going through in terms of a lot of moving parts at that point in time. Looking at all of those moving parts and really very scarce, valuable resources, be it like masks, like gloves, and so on and so forth, all those personal protective equipments, using our AI technology and high-speed computing, what we call now quantum-inspired computing, which gives the ability to churn through a lot of variables and kind of process them in milliseconds. We were able to provide dynamic, up-to-the-minute recommendations as to how these valuable resources need to be sent where, looking at all these dynamically changing conditions. I can imagine some of the crisis that is currently going on with the geopolitical crisis and so forth. Maritime industry is having such enormity of challenges. So that's one of the examples how Fujitsu has been, though it touches upon the meat of the problem, which is the supply chain, but it's adjacent to maritime industry, and that's one of the examples that I've been personally involved, which I feel is a powerful example of how you can use these evolving technologies like AI, quantum-inspired computing, to address some of these grave challenges.
Yeah, George, I think you're raising just a really interesting point. Aren't ports really the hyper-connected example of all the industries we're dealing with today? Aren't all the businesses that we focus on and consult with are part of a broader ecosystem and a partner ecosystem? And oftentimes they're not, we have to change our view of clients sometimes, that they're not always the center of the universe. Sometimes they're a player in a different value chain for someone else in a significant way. And with as much touch and reach as the ports have, they're kind of the model of that ecosystem player that has to play well among everybody. And when you say, playing along in those ecosystems, it means, technology that Chan is very aware of, but also the business relationships that they have, the end customer view that they have to push, the information flows that have to go through and be effective. So I think what we see is, they're kind of a hyper example of what we see in almost all the industries that we are consulting with.
Thank you for that, Jim and Shan. Shan, I'm going to come to you with the question here. You are the head of AI. So when we talk about AI in maritime ports and digital transformation, what are we talking about specifically?
Well, it's a very loaded question. And the reason is, like, if you think about like the challenges that maritime industry is facing, not just from coming up from the unplanned disruptions. When I say unplanned, who thought like COVID would kind of turn the head around regarding the global supply chain, and then we all saw what happened when a container blocked Suez Canal, right? Like kind of redrew the map, and what's happening today with the geopolitical crisis, where like shippers have to take long routes. So a lot of these, I would say challenges, which are, literally kind of thrown at maritime industry, like almost on a day-to-day basis, right? But I also think like there are some legacy challenges as well that these industry face, right? Like, just putting my data and analytics hat on, the lack of data standardization. And if you think about this ecosystem that Jim talked about, right? Like, from manufacturer to a consumer and everybody in between in the maritime industry, how is the data being shared, right? Like, is there transparency, from start to finish? So there's a lot of, with the lack of those data standardization, there's a lot of siloed, decision making and so on and so forth. So if you put all of these, the legacy challenges and the unplanned disruptions that are happening by the minute, the challenges are enormous, right? Like, it starts with, if you think about COVID situation, labor shortages, for instance, right? Like, we have seen several pictures of the container clogged ports. A number of these challenges, and more importantly, I think as the customer experience is evolving, I think the demand from the customer is also vastly increased. Like, people want instant delivery of their products, right? So all of these complex multitude of factors provides a lot of challenges to maritime industry. So this is where we feel like AI would be a game changer, right? Like, but when you use technologies like AI and high-speed computing, or even like quantum computing, then what you can see is, like, you can analyze this multitude of variables and then do a what-if scenario analysis to come up with the optimal, I would say, recommendations or actions, if you will. So I think the enormity of the challenges, that maritime industry is having, leaves AI as a big technology enabler and game changer, if I can call that way.
Thank you very much, Shan. Maybe an example of where Fujitsu has applied AI in maritime port industry to enhance efficiency and productivity. Is that something maybe you want to share with the audience that's on here today?
So Jim or Mark, if can progress to the screen, like, I will talk about a particular port example. This is Port of Hamburg in Germany, one of the major ports in the geography. Again, before touching upon it, I talked about, though it's adjacent to ports, I talked about the supply chain crisis we were trying to address head on during the COVID pandemic, but this is very specific to ports. You can see, it's a very, intense, cargo movement within the Port of Hamburg, really 130 million tons per year. A lot of, cargo movement in and out. So I think one of the challenges that our client was facing was it leads to a lot of traffic congestions, right? Like, during, because it is sitting right in the neighborhood, the school going, office going population, and then and if you put all these cargo coming in and out, the trucks and so forth, it adds to a lot of traffic congestions in the area, and then it leads to, like, less utilization, operational inefficiency of their infrastructure. The loading docks waiting for the trucks to arrive, and the trucks not arriving on time because of traffic congestion. So it's kind of a dominoes effect, if you will. So what we did is, like, we looked at all of these problems, and as I explained, like, the multitude of variables which is causing them. And then what we did was we basically used AI algorithms and our quantum-inspired computing technology to understand what the objective is. The objective is to reduce traffic congestion, to increase the utilization of the infrastructure in and around ports, and thereby, I know this is a big topic among all of the maritime stakeholders, which is about carbon reduction, right? Like, in the process of gaining operational efficiency, how can you reduce carbon footprint as well? So trucks spend less time on the roads, moving cargoes more efficiently by using less trucks on the roads, of course, leads to less emissions and thereby contributing to your green goals. So by looking at all of these problems and applying our unique technologies, coming up with AI algorithms and using our proprietary quantum-inspired computing, we were able to deliver complex calculations because I think they were not able to, the client was not able to do, balance all of these, objectives in a measurable way. So we were able to provide complex calculations of all of these possible scenarios in a very few seconds, what was normally taking them very long period of time, to do all of these, analysis in batch, like, what needs to happen like tomorrow versus like what needs to happen the next minute or two. Those type of very dynamic calculations was enabled through our technology. And really, from a business outcome perspective, it reduced congestion by close to around 15%. May not sound a lot, but if you look at like a big city, in a big port like Hamburg, that's absolutely substantial in terms of the value that provides to the citizens residing around that, but also, in terms of the emissions that it reduces. So that's a very recent example. And of course, there's a whole and a heap of information, as well as, we proudly, behold the interview that the client, which is Port of Hamburg authorities, spoke about this particular aspect of the work that we did. So I welcome you all to, just, look at those in YouTube or, or on the open source, if you will, in Google and so forth. But reducing traffic flow using our technologies by providing complex calculations resulted in wholesale business outcome, but also contributing to carbon reduction as well, in a small way. Hopefully that gives one example of how we have used AI to help with some of these challenges that maritime industry faces, John.
Thank you, Shan. That was a great example that you just gave there. And we have another question around the AI solutions, right? Now, this more around the safety and security of maritime operations, sharing how does Fujitsu help address that particular area from improving safety and security in the maritime operations? How does Fujitsu AI solutions help there?
Yeah, I'll reserve the slide for the next topic, George. But when we talk about safety and security, right? Like, let's take the actual ports as an example, right? There is a lot of monitoring going around the ports, ecosystem. Safety and security is paramount, right? Like, you need to analyze the video feeds to understand, if there are any safety risks, unauthorized, entry into secure locations for various, security reasons is another concern, if you will. So what we do here at Fujitsu is, we've been working with a number of clients, in different sectors, including some of the adjacent industries like manufacturing and so forth. We take video feeds, and then apply what we call as computer vision AI, really, drawing vision intelligence from the data, from the video data. By looking at like human interactions, you can understand like, what we call like a human sensing, AI, which will understand the movements relation to the ecosystem. For instance, like somebody is moving towards a loading truck, for instance, like, which is deemed as an unsafe practice. Somebody is trying to enter an unsecure or prohibited area, for instance. So all of that can be understood instantaneously by looking at the video data, which is, most of the times comes as a live feed, and whatever actions that need to be taken, whether that's alerting somebody like a duty manager, for instance, or using those data sets for training purposes, saying that like what's a safe or versus an unsafe practice, or some of the things that we use. But behind this, underpinning all of these, is the technology, what we call as actualizer or computer vision AI, which understands human motion with related to the ecosystem, whether they are working on certain objects, whether they're moving towards certain objects and so forth. You can draw up certain rules to take immediate action, so you can ensure safety, before any untoward incident occurs. B, you can understand, like, you can basically alert, if there is any unsafe or unsecure activity that's going on, and action can be taken instantaneously versus, trying to kind of, take action after the fact. So it's a very, I would say, unique technology. Pretty much a lot of industries are using, some of the industries that are like maritime, and I can see a number of other use cases around manufacturing, for instance, where you would see similar sort of like, loading and unloading happening all the time, raw materials coming in, finished products going out into the ports. Financial sector is another one which uses this exact same technology a lot to understand safety around the banks, ATMs, and so forth. But specifically talking about maritime, I can see ports benefiting a lot by by using these type of AI technology, specifically computer vision, to understand what's going on within their ecosystem and to take immediate remedial action if any action is considered as unsafe and unsecure.
Thank you very much, Shan. Now, before we completely switch gears, you did want to talk to us about that particular slide, and specifically, what are the challenges to implementing AI in maritime port sectors, and how does Fujitsu help customers in overcome these barriers?
So George, I think, as I talked about some of the challenges, right, like the business challenges that maritime industry is facing, but this is across the board. Every business is, the moment you talk about AI, the adoption, there is a lot of challenges for adoption. The first dampener is like availability of skilled resources, right? Now, what typically has seen as a domain of like data engineers, data scientists, and so forth. So the demand to supply is, completely disoriented. So there's absolute shortage of, highly skilled resources, right? And anytime we talk about newer technologies, and of course AI has been evolving and maturing, but by the day. But anytime you talk about these type of technologies, the business is hesitant to wait for a longer period of time to see return on investment, right? Like business needs problem solved today, tomorrow, versus waiting for a period of time. So there is a need, less patience among the business community to look at like what this technology can prove. The other challenge I would say is like a lot of these AI technologies, sometimes being newer technologies, being less resources and so forth, we start to do like a smaller, I would say, proof of concept, which is absolutely great. I think you basically have continuous and iterative values, but a lot of organizations don't plan for the end state, right? Like who are we going to benefit using this particular use case? Now, how do we go about like let's not plan for like what needs to be done today, tomorrow, and next week. Like how do we plan for the future ahead? Like what's the full value of this AI solution, right? So there's a lot of demand, and that's why I think the adoption rate is abysmally low among organizations which have not yet matured on using this technology. So what we are doing at Fujitsu is exactly addressing those challenges, right? Like we believe you don't have to have an army of team like data scientists and data engineers and qualified AI professionals to be able to embrace and benefit from this technology. We believe that AI, though it's very intrinsic, like from a technology standpoint, it should always be like be able to be used by business stakeholders. You don't have to be a technologist or a technical person. So that's exactly what we are doing. So what we have to address these challenges is an end-to-end AI platform called Kozuchi. Again, we're a Japanese company, so Kozuchi is a Japanese term which stands for magic mallet, right? Like you can consider like a magic wand. You wish and your wish is granted. But conceptually, I think if you had a problem, for instance, if you wanted to analyze safety and security, the example that you brought, George, you don't have to create AI solutions, algorithms. You basically have what I call as innovation components. You can see in this picture that's coded on blue. You have ready-made AI solutions or business intuitive use cases ready to be used by any client. So clients bring their data, use their video data, use our actualizer technology, and then immediately they can understand if there is a unsafe, unsecure practice, right? You don't have to build AI models from scratch. For example, a manufacturer in this, maritime ecosystem wants to understand if there's a product quality, right? Automate their product quality. They don't have to have tons of quality control engineers to be able to do that, or have an army of AI professionals to build those automated systems, right? Like we have something called product defect inspection right off the shelf, where you can look at the images of products and then quickly determine what is good, what is bad, so that the human intervention can only be at a very small population of the bad quality products versus doing a end-to-end quality inspection. So one of the things that we help our clients overcome of some of these AI adoption challenges is how can you deliver business value quickly, instantly, by using these ready-to-make business applications, which requires very minimal, if not like no technical expertise, to use that. Number two, we understand that every port, every client, every industry has unique challenges, right? Like, if somebody said like we have AI solutions for every problem of yours, I would absolutely say, that's just not possible, right? So you will have unique challenges. And how do we build AI solutions, from scratch and in a very short period of time, to address these challenges? See, if any of you, attending this conference, if you're from if you're a technical analyst, or if you're a technologist putting in delivering solutions to your business, you would understand the enormity of the situation, right? There's a lot of steps in the process, right? You have to understand the business, you have to analyze the data, you have to build AI models that you build today may not be accurate tomorrow. The unplanned disruptions that I talked about, that's coming every day, is changing the whole aspect of business. So how do you make sure the solution that you build today is giving relevant responses tomorrow, right, for all of these changing circumstances? So there's a lot of steps you need to go through to be able to build and deploy an AI solution for your business to use it. We have certain capabilities, like for instance, there is a bot called AI Core Engines, called in pink. For instance, I'll pick one, AutoML. AutoML is automation of machine learning code, right? What would normally take days, weeks for somebody to understand, analyze the data, and create a machine learning code to be able to solve the problem can be done in minutes, right? Like it's the system our AI solution automatically develops that machine learning code in minutes. So what you're doing is like you're having a great start. You're already saving weeks of time having to somebody to a team to analyze and build those codes. What we also are important is anytime you talk about AI to a client, they're very worried about like data security, ethical aspects of AI, right? Like, is there any bias that's going to be in the decisions that's coming? So we have capabilities that are around those areas because we are very big on AI ethics. We ourselves are part of contributing to AI ethical standards globally. So if you put all of these in combination, the blue aspect that I talked about, the innovation components, which lets business to start using AI, instantly. The AI core engines where you can pick and choose what you're trying to do and start to finish. You can do it in a fraction of time in developing AI solutions. That's how we are helping, organizations specifically in the port sector to be able to adopt, AI, faster, and more importantly, to be able to deliver business value quickly. I get so passionate about this topic and the challenges that clients face because that's what I talk on a daily basis. But hopefully you get the gist of it, George, which is AI shouldn't be to the elite technologists anymore. It should be at the hands of the business. That's kind of the philosophy that that Fujitsu and I, as the head of AI, take when promoting these business solutions to clients.
Thank you so much, Shan. Before we switch gears over to Jim, if you are on the call, just go to the chat. And if you're interested to hear more about Fujitsu's AI and want Shan to come speak to your team, to begin looking at how to go down that journey, just type #AI in the comments. Really appreciate that if you guys want to hear more from Shan with regards to AI. We will shift gears a little bit to really talk about how to transform. And we have Jim on the call. Jim, I have a couple of questions for you. And I think you and Shan have been on a number of rodeos, so Shan, do feel free to add in when you want to add when we're talking about this. So how does transformation, execution, and change strategy compare when we look at ports versus other industries? How is it different?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. It compares really. It really requires an alignment of several stakeholders. It's often involves significant change in the business, the operating model. If you want to click on the rest of that slide, it kind of opens up there. There you go. On the changes in the operating model, changes in fundamental change to the roles of the participants often is involved in these kind of changes. So in some ways, the change that ports are going through is the same kind of digital and AI and operating model changes you see in a lot of different industries. But it's almost because of the number of stakeholders involved, as Mark talked about right in the beginning, it's almost more complex because of that alignment that actually has to occur. So, and it's also aligned, and we'll talk about this a little later, in terms of the governance kind of approaches. How do you garner investment for these kind of changes and provide benefits along that whole value chain? So we'll talk a little more about that. So that's the way it's similar. It's different in both positive and negative ways, isn't it? The one that you hear from all the ports is when you've seen one port, you've seen one port. So, in some industries, there's some, comparisons that you can actually apply some best practices relatively easy. In ports, sometimes that's a little difficult from taking it from an operating port to a different port. Not everything translates as easily as it does in some industries. The other positive, though, about it that Shan and I have certainly seen in our times is sometimes there's less of a dense installed technology architecture and framework that needs to be adjusted or replaced. In some of the industries we work with adjacent to this, there's a lot of work that you typically have to do just to get in a position for some of these major, more AI-oriented changes. And that really lends itself to what Shan talked about, is starting small and starting at the edges, and then moving into the mainstream. But sometimes that's unable to affect the major manufacturing or other critical processes that you have in the other industries. So some good things, some positive things, and some difficult things that we find, I think, in ports.
Thank you very much, Jim, for that. We've talked a little bit about ports, and you spoke about adjacent industries. So what industries, including those that Fujitsu has experienced, provide some examples?
Yeah. Let's talk about one that is close to Shan and my heart here, is automotive OEMs, automotive suppliers. It's a much regulated industry. It's capital intensive players, but some unique new players on the side as well. The workforce is often unionized. It's really going through not only significant technology changes, but fundamental changes in its move from ICE to electric vehicles, and really major challenges that occur on this. So Shan and I had really an opportunity to work very significantly with an OEM that's going through those kind of changes, and we helped in fundamental ways. They had to change their application architecture to simplify it, deploy more cloud-based solutions so it was easier to do, dramatically change their cost structure so that they could pivot and work not only on ICE but EV kind of approaches. change the technology in terms of its connectedness to the vehicle and connected to the communities, which was very different. Major changes in the networks that they were dealing with in dealer and other kind of networks as well. Plus fundamental changes in manufacturing, that manufacturing had to be very different from EV to ICE kind of vehicles. So there are comparisons in this. There are those kind of difficulties that I think give some lessons for the ports. But I think one of the fundamental areas, though, that Shan, that they really took on is the question about value of their investments and how to deploy capital. They made some major changes that we were able to help with in how to look at their value realizations of the initiatives that they were doing. And it fundamentally changed where they invest and where they didn't invest. And there's winners and losers in that in the organization, but it really changed the way they looked at the profitability and the way they looked at value and moving forward. The other piece that I think was really interesting, Shan, and you touched on this, is their nimbleness and their agility. They actually went to a far more agile kind of approach in terms of their development and implementation kind of approaches. And they were more dramatic in turning things on and turning things off. So if an investment didn't look like it was going to pay, they had the courage and the metrics to actually change it and change direction and put money where there was a higher level of value. And I think that's a lesson that something that ports, I think, routinely have to do, because sometimes even their funding sources are changed or there's delays in how they can actually move forward.
So, Jim, if I can add to this exact example that you talked about, the OEM, the client that we both were, had an opportunity to help. Couple of aspects that we were helping with, I thought, has a great relevance to maritime industry, right? So one, we were helping this particular large OEM client with a new business model or a revenue stream, right? Like this is where I think not all of these technologies and strategy need to be focused on solving existing challenges. It also can open up new monetization opportunities, if you will, right? Like this particular client, though being OEM, they wanted to get into a new space, what we now call mobility, right? Like now, nothing about manufacturing cars. How do we kind of extend that now? And then two aspects that I feel like are very relevant to maritime. One is, how do we use multimodal transportation, to be able to, and this was about delivering parcels, right? You would think like an OEM has nothing to do with like getting into kind of the Amazon kind of the world, like in terms of delivering parcels. But yes, this client was kind of particularly using electric vehicles, and then think about like you having multimodal transportation techniques, and then understanding like how do we use lesser vehicles on the road, how do we use like more green vehicles and so forth, touches upon the core aspect of the carbon issue that ports are also addressing, right? And this particular project was in central London, as you can imagine. Like this was part of a green initiative of the city. The OEM was trying to use these type of techniques to use a multimodal transport with lesser vehicles on the road, mostly EV vehicles, and then be able to create a new business model for delivering parcels for retailers, if you will. And I thought, Jim, that example really, I think, maritime industry can use those principles, underlying principles and technology like multimodal shipping, and also like how to reduce congestion and carbon decarbonization and all of that, very relevant to this topic as well.
Yeah, I think one of the really important points you made there is not, we typically look at the value generation comes from the cost reduction in these organizations, and it's easier to prove. But the harder piece to deliver is that revenue generation part and getting into the new business side of it. And that was a really critical element for this OEM. And I think those opportunities are going to occur in ports as they garner some more of this information, create value out of it. How do they monetize it, or at least monetize it in a way that it creates value to their end customers?
Great.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So I will switch gears again for the last time. This time it's to both of you, and really want to put myself in the port's seat and ask, how do I garner the significant resources and power to make changes necessary? Right? How do I go about doing that? And maybe we'll kick off with you, Jim, in terms of the best way of going about building those strong business cases.
Yeah, let me start, Shan and team, then my colleagues can add in. And, I think one that was that Shan identified right in the very beginning is, how do you be value-based? One of the pieces that we've learned a lot in terms of our consulting is organizations look at what was the scope, and was it on time, and was it on budget. But lots of times they fail to look at what was the value produced and manage their initiatives in terms of the end goal of, how am I going to produce value on this? So as you see in kind of our digital planning approach, we always start with those at the very beginning. What is the outcomes that we're really trying to achieve? How do each of these initiatives contribute to those outcomes, even the most strategic outcomes? And if there's not an alignment or a link between there, it's hard to create an enthusiasm or a motivation in the organization. And even for Shan's example, and Shan is always good about this, is let's not just do technology for technology's sake. Even if you're starting small on some initiative, let's make sure that we have a value case or a direction that we're really trying to achieve with that technology. So I didn't just prove I can do LLMs for this particular piece. I can actually get to a value point in it. I think the other couple of things quickly, and I'll leave it to Shan, is, how does the governance work, and paying attention to how the decision making is actually occurring, and really routing that in the beginning so that you have checkpoints with the governance structures to be able to say yes, no, and moving it forward. I talked about flexibility a little bit. A lot of times, as you can see in our graphic, everyone has a roadmap that they're working on, but sometimes, I think especially in ports, you have to be a little bit flexible about that roadmap, that, one thing leads to another, and if that integration is important, okay, I need to focus there to get it done. However, if there's a stall, if I need this infrastructure in place, and Mark knows about this, that some of these are big physical infrastructures that have to be in place before the technology can attend to it, you've got to be flexible enough to stall and redeploy and then go again. I think that's one. And then lastly is operating in the community and focus on the customer. It's easier to get resources value if it has an outcome that really creates value to the end customer and is appreciated by the community in which all these ports operate. Shan, you have other thoughts?
So Jim, the only part I would add is, I think which you echoed as well, like, it's not about just looking at a particular objective, particularly operational efficiency or whatever it is in isolation. I am a big believer in in trying to kind of show residual value towards kind of new opportunities as well, right? Of course you can reduce cost, but how can you increase revenue? Or how can you provide better experience to customers? Always, like, I think a goal should be very progressive in terms of, like, what upliftment it gives to your business, or or to your and to end customers as well. Of course, for that you got to be a nimble, operationally efficient organization. I'll just quote one small example quickly in the interest of time. And of course, the big retail stores are big customers of maritime industry. Let's put it that way, right? Because they are just one step away from the final, customer, that maritime industries serves, which is getting the products to the end customer, right? So we had a similar experience talking to a retail giant. They wanted to use a similar technology, Josh, we talked about, like, the safety and security, the computer vision intelligence, if you will, really to address the problem for shoplifting, if you will, right? Like, looking at, theft and so forth. But I, just, putting my hat off, like, how can we make this a more of a, positive experience to the customers? We came up with some suggestions as to how can we use the same concept, but also address a different use case using generative AI. We're not only looking at a customer behavior, what he is trying to pick or not pick, as well as shoplifting and so forth. But in many cases, somebody is needing help, right? Like they're picking one product, what's the other, and so forth. How can we use generative AI to understand the demographic of the person who is right there on the store, the way he is interacting with the products on the shelf, and then using the monitors or digital signages closer to them. Using generative AI, we're trying to create an avatar which is appropriate to that demographic person, and using that avatar instantly flash product promotions or marketing information or just basic knowledge information about those type of products that he or she is looking at, right? If I am in a store, I go to pick up a bottle of wine all the time, and if I had a good information that's flashing on a good sale on cheese, of course I'm going to pick it up as well, right? So the example I'm quoting here is because same principles in terms of, like, how can you reduce cost, how can you make more efficient, can also be looked at from a slightly different angle as to how can this particular use case also be serving my revenue objectives as well. So that's a different lens that we always apply to whichever problem we are trying to solve for customers. But Jim, you covered most of it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, we are coming up on 3 minutes to the end. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If we don't get to them during this time on our webinar, we'll try and reach out to you, get the answers out to you. We'll work with the AAPA to respond to your questions. Gentlemen, I have one last question. How would a port get started? And let's try keep it brief. That way we could maybe try and not go over, even though we did start a little bit later.
Let me take the first one, team, and then move on. One of the things, right from the beginning is the role of all the folks that we have on the webinar today is, in our work with Mark, we've got to meet a lot of change leaders in the port. And I think it starts with individuals that say, hey, we're going to make a difference in our organization and move forward. So, the number one thing that we see in a lot of clients is you have to get over the inertia that often occurs in some of these organizations. And get started is getting started, is making your own individual move to be a leader in this. We could go through some other things like Shan talked about, start small, but pick a valuable, achievable kind of target, involve the right stakeholders and the stakeholders early. George, you're involved in a lot of our human-centric design work throughout the organization, the ability to engage people, make sure that gets that change done early, firing up that core team or your change team, being agile and nimble are all the kind of things that we would typically use to get started. And I'll turn it back to you, George.
All right. Thank you, Jim, for that. Shan, Mark, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Sorry,
well, I mean, the clearest way is to just pull us in for a conversation and just get the conversation going, or meet us at one of the AAPA conferences, and we'd love to learn more and see how we can help.
Yep. My parting comment is just get bold, because many a times you get into the rigmarole of like what will happen, get bold, start small, and promise business value quickly. Even if it's a very small business value, you will get a lot of support from your stakeholders. I think, getting bold and embracing these technologies is the right way to go. And in any way we can help, we'll be absolutely be honored to do so.
Thank you very much, team. That was fantastic. Over to you, Liz. Thank you for the time today.
All right, well, thank you guys, Mark, Shan, George, and Jim. That was a great presentation today, extremely topical, especially AI is front and center, whether we like it or not. I think most of us do like it, but just trying to learn more of the intricacies of it. And I hope all of you that joined us today feel like you gained something useful and something you can take away. So as our presenter said, reach out to them anytime, reach out to me, and then I can get you in touch with them as well, if that's easier for you. Any of you that are joining us at Powers in Tampa next week, the Fujitsu team will be there on site. So look for them if you'd like to continue a conversation. So this concludes our program for today, and I thank you all for your time and attention. And again, thanks to our wonderful speakers. It was great. I loved it. I enjoyed it. So hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and keep looking to your emails for future webinars. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, thank you.